Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is Pro Revenge Story. So this past Christmas, my partner Kelly and I purchased one of our 10-year-old son Max's Santa gifts from a certain UK sports retail company that also have many stores here in Ireland. It was a football rebounder, basically a spring-loaded frame that bounces the ball back when you kick it at it. We purchased it from their Irish website in early December 2024 and thought nothing more of it. A few days go by and we get a notification from a certain brown, uniformed courier company that there are customs charges due on something. As you can imagine, we'd bought many things for the kids, so we had to double-check what we'd ordered, and we didn't have anything left that was being imported. We naturally assumed it was a scam. This has to be some kind of mistake, I told Kelly. Better call the company and see what's going on. Kelly called the courier and found out it was shipped by a different carrier based in the UK. After a bit of digging and investigating, it turns out that it's our rebounder. They had shipped it from the UK via a local carrier to the brown uniformed guys to deliver to us. Now, Kelly and I are both on disability, so an additional charge of almost €50 when you're both already on a fixed income is harsh, especially at Christmas. Just pay it for now, I said to Kelly, sighing heavily. I'll deal with the retailer myself. The first day I called, I had to call 3 times, being stuck on hold for at least 20 minutes each time. I was patient and polite because I've worked in a call center before, so I knew those people are only doing their job. Could I please speak to a manager about this issue? I asked each time. Of course, sir. Someone will call you back within 24 hours, they'd promise. But no call ever came. The second day was quite similar. The third day I was starting to get annoyed, so I called back, waiting even longer on hold, and finally wasn't taking this nonsense any longer. Look, I told the representative, trying to keep my voice even, all I want is the €50 back because our consumer rights in Ireland dictate that a person must be informed of any additional charges on a purchase at the very latest by the final checkout screen. In this case, there was nothing to show that, and I could easily replicate that issue by putting the same item in my basket and going all the way to the checkout screen again. The rep sounded completely indifferent to the situation, but tried to help, and what he said sent me over the edge. I can offer you a €20 gift voucher to use on our website, he said flatly, then read from what was clearly a prepared statement. We advise our customers that there may be DDU charges, that's delivery duty unpaid, basically customs charges, on any item that gets shipped outside of the UK. Where exactly does it state this information? I asked him. There was a long pause, then he admitted, I don't actually know. Well, I know one thing, I replied, my patience finally gone. It doesn't say it anywhere on this transaction because I've checked. Because this is a violation of my consumer rights, I'm going to give your company one last chance to make this right. Have your manager call me within the next 60 minutes, or I'm going to post this entire debacle on LinkedIn and tag every senior officer in your company. Then I hung up the phone and waited. Yet again, no call. The next day I went on LinkedIn and followed through on my promise. I created a post detailing what they had done by sticking us with hidden charges, how they were ignoring our requests for a manager and everything they said and did. Then I tagged every senior officer at that company, from the regional managers, through the European directors, all the way to the CEO, and I shamed them for how they operate their company. This, I muttered to Kelly as I hit post, is now an act of war. Shortly after I posted that, I noticed they took down the item from their website in an attempt to hide it. They must have thought I'm some simpleton who doesn't understand how the internet works. They didn't realize that when you searched for rebounder on their site, it still showed the item in question. Look at this, I told Kelly. They're trying to hide the evidence. I took a screenshot of the search results, then another of the item page that was now missing. But then I did a Google cached search for the same page and found a version from 2 days prior happily showing the item. I added a comment to my original post highlighting how they were trying to hide it with the evidence and calling them out for their behavior, especially at Christmas. Then I tagged and shamed all the senior officers again. At this point, it was really starting to get some attention, not only publicly, but 3 people in incognito mode viewed my profile. I wonder who they could have been. So naturally, I took a screenshot of the 3 mysterious visitors listed on my profile and did the same thing. I commented on my own post, highlighting it and pointing out their incompetence. You know they're watching now, Kelly said with a laugh. This might actually work. The next morning, I got a call from a senior exec at their head office in the UK, practically falling over herself with apologies. Mr. O'Connor, I'm Sarah from corporate headquarters, she said. I've just seen your LinkedIn posts about your experience with our company, and I want to personally apologize. What can we do to make this right? I was direct. I originally only wanted my 50 euros back as it wasn't fair, nor even legal, that I had to pay it. But since I had to go to such lengths to get your attention, now I want my 50 euros back, a full refund on my entire purchase, and I want to keep the product. That's the only thing that would make this go away. I understand completely, she said, sounding genuinely contrite. Give me a couple of hours to sort this out for you. Fine, I replied. I'll be waiting. About an hour later, I got another call from her again, apologizing. She asked for my PayPal address where she promptly sent the 50 euros, then she refunded the whole purchase price and confirmed we could keep the product. I thanked her for her help because at that stage I was just happy it was over, but I'll be damned if I'll let anyone walk all over my family, even if they are a £58 million annual company. You won't believe what just happened, I told Kelly afterward. They refunded everything, and we get to keep the rebounder. That's brilliant, she said. Max is going to be so happy. The moral of the story here is, don't take nonsense from anyone. I may be just one person, but my son's view of Santa is far more valuable to me than the opinion of some retail chain that doesn't care about its customers or how it operates ethically. The next one is an entitled people story. I've been managing the regional operations department for my company for about 8 years now. It's not a glamorous job, but I'm good at it. I've built a solid team, we hit our numbers consistently, and my people generally like working for me because I'm reasonable and I trust them to do their jobs. That trust thing is important because it becomes the center of this whole mess. We hired a new operations coordinator a few months back. She came in with an impressive resume, great interview, all the right answers, her references checked out. On paper, she was perfect. In reality, she turned out to be one of those people who thinks having worked at a couple of big-name companies for short stints makes them an expert on everything. From day one, she had opinions about how we were doing things wrong. I'm all for fresh perspectives, but there's a difference between suggesting improvements and acting like everyone around you is an idiot. She fell firmly into the second category. During her first week, she actually told one of my senior team members that the way he'd been processing vendor contracts for the past 6 years was completely backwards. Never mind that his method was efficient and had never caused a single problem. The thing that really got under my skin was how she'd constantly reference her time at these other companies. Every conversation was peppered with phrases like, well, at my last company we never did it that way, or this wouldn't fly at the places I've worked before. Cool story, but you're here now, and here we do things a bit differently because we're not a massive corporation with endless bureaucracy. About a month in, she started going over my head to my boss with concerns about team efficiency. My boss, to his credit, forwarded me these emails and basically told me to handle it however I saw fit. The new employee was questioning why we had flexible start times, why people could work from home twice a week, why I didn't require detailed daily reports from everyone. She seemed personally offended that I ran what she called a loose ship. The reality was that my team was productive precisely because I didn't micromanage them. They were professionals who knew their jobs. If someone needed to start late because of a doctor's appointment or wanted to work from home because their kid was sick, I didn't make a big deal out of it as long as the work got done, and the work always got done. But this new employee was convinced she'd discovered some massive management failure. She started keeping notes on when people arrived, when they left, who was working from home. I found out she'd actually created a spreadsheet tracking everyone's hours. When I confronted her about it, she acted like she was doing me a favor. She said someone needed to maintain standards, and if I wasn't going to do it, she would step up. That's when I knew I had a real problem. This wasn't just someone with opinions. This was someone who genuinely believed she should be running things despite being the newest and least experienced person on the team. The rest of my staff started complaining about her. She'd insert herself into their work, criticize their methods, and generally make everyone miserable. The breaking point came during a team meeting about 6 weeks after she started. We were discussing a project timeline, and I laid out my expectations for deliverables. Pretty standard stuff. The new employee raised her hand like we were in grade school and said she had concerns about accountability. She then launched into this whole speech about how we needed to implement a formal reporting structure with daily check-ins, written status updates, and mandatory attendance policies. I tried to politely explain that our current system worked fine and we weren't going to overhaul everything based on her limited experience with the team. That's when she made her fatal mistake. She said, and I remember this clearly because it was so audacious, that if I wasn't willing to enforce proper professional standards, she would need it in writing that she was exempt from what she called my lax policies. She wanted documentation stating that she would be held to a higher standard of accountability than everyone else. I should have seen it for what it was, a trap. She was trying to create a paper trail that would make me look bad, like I was playing favorites or not maintaining proper standards. But in that moment, looking at her smug face and watching my other team members roll their eyes, I decided to give her exactly what she wanted. I told her that if she wanted to be held to a stricter standard, I would be happy to accommodate that request. I'd put it in writing. Her smile got even wider. She thought she'd won. The rest of the team looked concerned, like they knew I was walking into something, but I had a plan. After the meeting, I drafted up a document outlining the enhanced professional standards that would apply specifically to her at her request. I went through our employee handbook and pulled out every single policy that existed. Things that were technically rules, but that I never enforced rigidly because they were either outdated or unnecessarily strict. Start time was officially 8 in the morning sharp, not 8:05, not 7:55 rolling in with coffee. 8 o'clock at your desk, logged in, ready to work. Lunch break was exactly 30 minutes, not a minute more. End time was 5 o'clock, but you couldn't leave until all your tasks for the day were documented in the system. Work from home required 48 hours advance notice and written justification. Sick days required a doctor's note, even for a single day. Every project needed a detailed status report submitted daily by end of business. I also included all the tedious bureaucratic requirements that existed in the handbook, but that I normally didn't bother people with. Expense reports had to be submitted within 24 hours of any purchase with receipts attached. Any email to external vendors had to be CC'd to me for review. All phone calls with clients needed a written summary filed in the system. Time tracking had to be logged in 15-minute increments throughout the day. The document was 5 pages long. I sent it to her and said HR and my boss, explaining that at the employee's request, she would be operating under these enhanced accountability measures to ensure the highest professional standards. I made it sound completely reasonable, like I was supporting her desire to excel. She signed it without really reading it carefully. I think she was too busy feeling victorious. She genuinely believed she just maneuvered me into documenting that I had lower standards for everyone else, and she'd use that eventually to make me look bad. The first few days were entertaining. She showed up at exactly 8, not a minute early, and made a show of logging in right on time. She took exactly 30-minute lunches, timing them on her phone. She stayed until 5, pecking away at her daily reports. My other team members continued operating as they always had, coming in when they needed to, working from home when it made sense, and actually getting their work done without drowning in paperwork. The cracks started showing in the second week. She had a dentist appointment and asked to start late. I reminded her that medical appointments required 48 hours advance notice according to her enhanced standards agreement. She had to reschedule. Then her car broke down one morning, making her 20 minutes late. I documented it as a policy violation and put a written warning in her file. She tried to work from home one day when she had a minor cold, not sick enough for a doctor, but not feeling great. I told her she hadn't provided the required 48 hours notice and written justification, so she needed to come into the office or use a sick day. Since sick days required a doctor's note under her agreement, she dragged herself into the office and spent the day miserable, spreading her cold to half the floor. The real problems started when her workload increased. We landed a big project that required long hours from everyone. My team handled it the way they always did, working efficiently, collaborating, staying late when needed, but also taking time when they needed it. She, however, was drowning in paperwork. Every client call needed a summary. Every email to vendors needed my review, which delayed responses. Her daily status reports were taking her over an hour to complete each day. She started staying until 7 or 8 at night, trying to keep up with both the actual work and all the documentation requirements. Meanwhile, she watched everyone else leave at reasonable hours while still hitting their targets. The irony was completely lost on her. She'd asked to be held to higher standards, and now she was being crushed by them. About 4 weeks into this arrangement, she came to my office looking exhausted. She said she wanted to discuss modifying her enhanced standards agreement. I asked her why. She said it was creating inefficiencies and preventing her from doing her best work. I agreed completely and said that's exactly why I didn't enforce all those policies with my other team members. They were professionals who could manage their own time and workload effectively. She didn't like that answer. She said it wasn't fair that everyone else got flexibility while she was stuck with all these requirements. I pulled out the document she'd signed and reminded her that this was at her request. She'd insisted on being held to higher standards. She'd wanted it in writing. I was simply honoring her wishes. That's when she made her second fatal mistake. She went to HR and my boss, claiming I was creating a hostile work environment and discriminating against her by holding her to different standards than everyone else. She actually filed a formal complaint. The HR meeting was brief. The representative pulled up the email chain where she'd demanded enhanced accountability standards. They reviewed the document she'd signed requesting this arrangement. They noted that I'd given her multiple opportunities to operate under the same flexible policies as everyone else, and she'd specifically declined. Then they pulled her performance metrics. Turns out that while she was busy documenting everything and following every policy to the letter, her actual productivity had tanked. She was completing about 60% of the work of her peers while working longer hours. She'd also managed to annoy several key vendors with her delayed email responses and overly formal communication style. 2 clients had specifically asked that someone else be assigned to their accounts because working with her was too difficult. HR gave her a choice. She could either return to the standard flexible policies that everyone else operated under and accept my management style, or she could continue under her enhanced standards agreement. If she chose to continue with the enhanced standards, she needed to improve her productivity to match her peers within 30 days or face termination. She chose to stick with the enhanced standards. I think her pride wouldn't let her admit she'd been wrong. For the next 3 weeks, she tried desperately to keep up with both the workload and the paperwork while following every policy exactly. She failed. Her productivity actually decreased further as she became more stressed and exhausted. At the end of the 30 days, HR and I sat down with her for her performance review. The numbers didn't lie. She was the lowest performer on the team by a significant margin. She'd generated complaints from both internal team members and external clients. Despite working longer hours than anyone else, she was producing less. I didn't fire her out of spite or revenge. I fired her because she'd made herself unemployable through her own rigid adherence to rules and her refusal to adapt. Her last words to me were that this wasn't fair, that I'd set her up to fail. I reminded her one final time that I'd given her exactly what she asked for. She'd wanted to be held to higher standards. She'd wanted everything in writing. She'd wanted strict accountability. She got all of it, and it destroyed her. The rest of my team breathed a collective sigh of relief when she was gone. We went back to our normal way of operating, getting work done efficiently without unnecessary bureaucracy. I kept that signed document in my files as a reminder that sometimes the best way to deal with someone who thinks they know better is to let them prove they don't. The moral of the story isn't that rules are bad, it's that blind adherence to rules without understanding their purpose or context is a recipe for failure. My job as a manager isn't to enforce every policy in the handbook, it's to help my team succeed. Sometimes that means flexibility, sometimes that means trusting people to manage themselves, and sometimes apparently it means letting someone dig their own grave with a pen they insisted on using. She wanted to show me how a real professional operates. Instead, she showed herself exactly why experience and wisdom matter more than rigid rule following. I hope she learned something from the experience, but somehow I doubt it. People like that rarely do. The first one is a petty revenge story. Backstory. A few years ago, I bought my first house in a medium-sized 1,000 homes neighborhood in a southern state. It had an HOA, but I actually picked the neighborhood because they had the lowest HOA dues in the city, the fewest rules, and the house was by far the nicest one I could afford in my budget. After a few weeks, I get a violation notice from the HOA telling me that I had 2 violations needing correction. 1. My lawn was not green enough. 2. My trash cans were too close to my driveway. I was thoroughly confused about #1 as it was February, in the middle of winter, so of course my lawn was dead, like pretty much everyone else's. So I had assumed that either this was a mistake or an existing offense from the previous owner. As for the trash cans, I kept them on the side of my house, and I think when the HOA came by, my trash cans stuck out past the side wall approximately 1 foot, so how dare I? I shrugged them off and continued on. Come March, I got another notice, this time fining me for both violations. Each one cost me $100, and they wanted the money in 2 weeks. I was pissed. This has made no sense, and I was not about to let them just try and get money for BS violations, so I called the management company that worked with the board to get them appealed. The lady told me that I needed to appeal directly to the board, and that I could do so in the next annual meeting in a few days. So, I of course showed up to the meeting. Prior to it starting, I met with a few homeowners, and learned that they were all there for similar BS violations, and were pissed off too. I then talked with one of the members of the board about the fine appeals process. He was an older guy in his 70s with short gray hair and a very worn and angry face. He asked what I was getting fined for, and when I told him, he just looked at me and said, "And you should get fined for that. Young people like you not taking care of their homes is the whole reason I got on this board. Learn to be a better property owner." This dude was the VP of a volunteer board telling me that I did not know how to take care of my house. What a sad life. The meeting then started, and the moderator mentioned that since this was an annual meeting, we would be voting on 3/5 board members. They had some applicants to the board, and we could also nominate someone today. That's when I had the idea of how I could get my revenge. When the election part of the meeting came, I nominated myself, gave some BS speech about HOAs are not here to make money and that I wanted to serve my community. I won in a landslide, and you could see the board members getting annoyed because they had scowled during my speech. After the meeting, I appealed my violations in a very elegant way, and they agreed to waive my trash can violation. As for the grass one, apparently since I had weeds growing in my yard, like Tiny Patch in the corner, they were still fining me because the weeds were turning yellow after I sprayed them. I was dumbfounded how they could get away with this, but they used a technicality in the bylaws that I had signed, so I ended up losing $100. Revenge. I will be honest, I had not expected this to work. After joining the board, of 5 including myself, I was appointed secretary and had to help maintain meeting notes and review records. They specifically told me that I was not allowed to propose new policies, but I could vote on new ones proposed by the VP or president, which I later learned was actually a violation of their own rules. I voted every new rule down as long as I was in that position. I decided that my best course of action was to listen to how the others operated and look for an opening to get each of them off the board. The first opening came when the president, who literally looked like the most Karen woman ever, mentioned that she had wanted to fine for flowers that were not neutral color. Basically, if a homeowner wanted to add something like turquoise flowers, we would fine them. She apparently had a neighbor that had flowers that she didn't like, and she wanted to use the board to stop them. It was pretty insane. I then started my revenge on her. I started a message thread, on Slack since that's how we communicated, with the other board members and asked what they had thought about her policy and reasoning. After far too much deliberation, 2 of them honestly thought that this was okay, we agreed that the policy went too far. I then made a long post in the main channel telling her that her actions were not only wrong, but that she should be excused from the board. When she inevitably flipped out, I called a board meeting in the following week, and the other 4 board members voted her off for targeting a community member for personal gain. She gave a sob story about how the board was her life and that the neighborhood was like her child, but I didn't care. That was 1 down. I convinced one of my good neighbor friends to join a little later on to take her spot. The next members I targeted were the treasurer and director, as I wanted to save the VP for last. They were actually pretty easy to get off the board because they were very easily swayed by public opinion. So, I made a fake account on Nextdoor and waited until spring, when most of the violations go out. When the letters went out, I looked for angry posts on Nextdoor. I then would comment on each one, giving them the first names of the 2 board members as the culprits and told them to come to the next HOA meeting to appeal. It worked far better than I had expected. During the next meeting, over 50 people showed up and called out those by name. It was glorious. During the open session, community members grilled those 2 for their poor policies, even though they did not make most of them. The VP, now president after the other one resigned, tried to defend them, but ultimately failed. The 2 members were so distraught after the meeting, and I told them that maybe they should resign, and they both did. That was 2 more down, both of which were replaced by a couple who came to the same meeting and wanted to get rid of these rules. Finally, the board had been flipped to 4 out of 5 people wanting to get rid of all these dumb rules. The president, however, was still same old angry, hateful man. He tried to add more rules to increase violation revenue, and we voted him down every time. He started to get annoyed, but stayed steadfast to the board. I tried a lot of tactics to get him to leave, and not much swayed him. A few months went by, and we started with a new management company. They had a much better style of property management and a website for looking through our community's records as well as automated reports. When we got our first fines report, I hit pay dirt. The president's house appeared, and he owed around $10,000. Apparently, he had open violations that he had never paid, and the other management company hid it from the board for him, since he had been on the board for close to 7 years. So, I looked into remedies. Since his fines were over $3,000, our bylaws stated that a majority vote of the board could start an HOA foreclosure on the home, which I still think is insane that HOAs can do that. So, I got all the docs together and double-checked with the new management company that the fines were correct, which they confirmed. I called an emergency board session, presented the information, and 4/5 of us voted to start the foreclosure process. The president got angry, cursed, and left the meeting early. We were informed a few days later that the president had resigned, paid his fine, and put his house up for sale. While I am sad we couldn't force a foreclosure, at least he was off the board. I am currently president to this day, and I have reduced the fining policy to be a maximum of $400, and homeowners can appeal any time that they wish digitally. In addition, I have banned any grass fines until May, and trash can violations have been super relaxed. Morale of the story, never fine me $200, call me a stupid young kid, and expect to not lose your house. The next one is a malicious compliance story. In the early years of being a pharmacist, jobs in my city were hard to come by. I managed to get full-time hours by working for a couple of pharmacist friends at both of their stores. They would work out my schedule together and put an X on my schedule on the days I was at the opposing store. One store was downtown and one was in the suburb I lived in. At the suburb pharmacy, I had a coworker D who could just not wrap her brain around the fact that if there was an X by my name, I was in fact working. Just at the other store. Multiple times I would have call after call on my cell phone and hang-ups on my answering machine at home because she wanted me to cover her shift at the suburb store when I was already working downtown. Worst thing was, my cell phone charged me for every single call, so after the second time of her pulling this, I would get downtown and immediately pull the battery off my phone. This made her angry at me for ignoring her, and we had a tepid relationship after that. Time went on, and the suburb store started expanding their nursing home operations, so I was able to work there full-time instead. I still had a great relationship with the downtown store, and they had me keep the keys in case of emergencies. They would occasionally come up, and the X would be on the schedule by my name. Sadly, Dee became the assistant manager, and now thought she was the boss of me. Now, downtown pharmacist's daughter was getting married, and suburb pharmacist was invited to all the festivities. I got scheduled to work the Thursday before at the downtown store. The X went by my name on the suburb schedule. I was also going to the wedding. I was good friends with the daughter, but missing the Mendy party on the Thursday I was working for her mum. I was on the phone with her on my break one time, and she was saying how sorry she was I was missing it, and I said, "Don't worry, I'll just doodle brown Sharpie all over my hands and pretend I was there when we aren't busy." Now at that exact week, we were getting new pharmacy software downloaded. Nursing homes are run on a batch system where all the labels are run about 5 days before, and then all the bubble packs are made up during that time, and then the actual billing is done on the Thursday for the meds to be delivered Friday. Dee decided that she did not want the batch to be done, and just wanted everything to be processed and made up on the Thursday for just this first week. My technician was freaking out, so I just told her to make up the usual drug cards, Lipitor, Aspirin 81, multivitamin, Altas, etc., without any patient data just to help speed things along. Dee overheard and told the tech that she wasn't allowed to do that, and this younger generation is just scared of hard work. I panicked a bit because I was the only one of my age, Gen X, as all my coworkers were boomer aged or older. I went and checked the schedule. Yep, there's an X by my name. I won't be there for the Shasterisk show, but somehow Dee thinks I am. Why should I tell her any different? Thursday rolls around and at 12:30 my cell phone starts blowing up. It's in my purse in the safe because I don't get a lunch break, only pharmacist, and everyone can hear it. Out comes the battery. I get home after work and there's screaming and swearing on my answering machine. A locum pharmacist worked the morning shift and wasn't instructed to do anything, so everything was left for Dee when she arrived at 12:30. She had to work late to finish over 500 prescription drug cards. I come in the next day and she's still furious. "You said you were working. I heard you talking about the effing Mendy thing." I told her I was working, just not at that store, as evidenced by the X by my name. I learned then that she could eavesdrop on the break room from one place in the pharmacy when she herself was the only pharmacist working at the time. All my breaks were taken in my car after this. Anyway, thank you for watching.